Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CustomerSure Closed Loop podcast. I'm Darren Wake, Head of Customer Success at CustomerSure, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Alicia Crowther. So welcome back, Alicia.
Yes, thank you.
So Alicia is the founder of 3 Digital Consulting, based in Newcastle, and it's wonderful to have you back again for the second part of our podcast.
Thanks so much.
What I'd like to talk about in this podcast is around innovation and the creative problem-solving process, because a lot of what we encounter in the VOC and CX world is finding out the insights to what customers think and feel about an organization. But then that can often then lead to the start of an innovation or creative problem-solving process. So I'm interested in your take on that whole process and any examples that you might have seen.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one area where businesses don't do enough. I think there really should be more kind of creative thinking. People, again, even us in this industry, right, are just used to doing things in the same way. And we do things the way that we've always done. And so sometimes it can feel a little bit uncomfortable or scary even to think about, how do we really think more creatively? And I'm lucky, my brain just kind of works that way. So I tend to kind of think of ideas that are a little bit maybe out there and seem a little bit bizarre. But for me, it's really that part of the process of actually almost just getting your brain used to thinking in that way. And then you can come up with some ideas. So we were just saying, when you get that survey back or when you get that insight that comes in, that's really just the first part of the process, right? And then I need to know, what do I actually do with this data to make some sense? So the data itself isn't actually telling you anything. It's your job to say, this is the problem that we identified, and then we can solve this in a number of different ways. And that's when you really have the opportunity to think creatively. Sometimes all you need maybe is a content change. Sometimes you need a new feature to be able to solve that problem. Sometimes you need to think about how you could run your business differently in order to solve that problem. So there's all kinds of layers really of how you could solve problems. And one of the things that I think a lot of businesses have a problem with is the fact that they want to be so fast. So they focus on speed instead of focusing on time to think, or how to think creatively and how to encourage that creative thinking in their workforce. So those are, I think, some of the challenges. It's around just making sure that you kind of create that safe space and time for people to be able to think just a little bit differently about problems.
I think it's a really good point, actually, because I think there is a nervousness or resistance or a cautiousness or perhaps being a bit scared of open to new ideas and change. But if you think about the organizations which are widely celebrated and talk about innovation, whether it be an Apple and the Steve Jobs kind of culture, or the kind of Ubers of the world that they're more like disruptors, where it's nothing's off the table. Let's start with a blank sheet of paper and almost create something different based on a customer need, then that's a braver place to be, actually. And I think my personal take is if organizations could be more open to that. No idea is a bad idea, let's look at it, and if it's right or worth a try, let's give it a go. If not, we'll park it. So
I think the Googles of the world, they'll have entire innovation teams, and I think we only hear about the successes, but I think I've read somewhere that 90% of the ideas that these teams work on fail.
Yes.
And that's okay. Again, that's back to that. It's a learning, and you're learning what resonates in the market and what doesn't. So taking the time to have that kind of innovation space is really important. And, you might not, your business probably doesn't have an innovation team, and that's okay. But you can, maybe be the spearhead for that within your organization and say, let's try things differently. Can I have, maybe half a day a week in order to just try some things that maybe seem a bit out there. But, it's just looking at, how do we find that value for our customers? Like we were talking about before, it's not about, if we focus too much on optimizing for the business and for revenue, then we're missing out on those opportunities really to find those spaces where we can be more creative with the solutions that we come up with.
I totally agree with that. And I think where I've seen it work well is company culture have an openness and they welcome new ideas. And like you say, so some organizations to the point where they say, look, 10, 20% of your time, just spend it on working on new ideas, which is a very kind of brave way of putting it, but it sets the tone all the way down to companies that may not be as structured as that. But I've seen organizations where, look, it's a suggestion box. You guys as employees, you're dealing with customers all the time. come up with some suggestions of how we could maybe make things better, then there's a whole way of you can foster and encourage that open culture, if you like, that you're receptive.
Yeah, and it's kind of back to, a lot of times companies think they have to do everything themselves.
Yes.
Or they think they have to copy what everybody else is doing in the market. So we need this feature because everybody else has it, or we need an app because everybody else has it. And so, I've worked with companies where they actually have innovation days, for example. So maybe there's a smaller company out there that has an app or a service or something that would really benefit your customers. You don't need to build it yourself. Why not create a new partnership? I think the last time we were together, we were talking about the really interesting local partnership here in Newcastle between Phoenix and Greg's. Phoenix is a high-end department store. Greg's is your sausage roll. Everybody knows, on the street, get a Greg's sausage roll. And they created a really interesting pop-up kind of event where they served 75-pound glasses of champagne with 5-pound sausage rolls.
Yes.
And they were sold out every day.
Yes.
So, they were thinking differently about how they brought their brand and their values together. And it was a partnership that, again, who could imagine that, right? So sometimes, again, it doesn't have to be you have to do everything yourself. It's what partners are available in your marketplace that you could maybe run, some type of event with or, use their strengths.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I did smile to myself when you mentioned Greg's, because obviously local success story here in the Northeast. But their kind of initiative with Primark of handing Greg's branded clothing, which is totally off the wall, but someone came up with that idea, and I love that receptiveness and openness, and I kind of would love it if more organisations were a bit more blank canvas. Let's think about our offering, what our clients, our customers love about us. Okay, not every company is a Greg's, but to say, okay, let's do something crazy and collaborate with a brand on the high street that have a kind of matches our approach. With Primark was a perfect one. Let's co-create a clothing line.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's one of the best-selling lines of clothing at Primark. That's what I've read.
And I think this idea of being creative and kind of out there is it really just presents this opportunity for customers to find something that's completely different. And it's like we said, customers don't necessarily know what they want.
No.
They want something that's unique and special, and they can talk about it with their friends and that type of thing. So thinking outside the box helps to, kind of create this opportunity to have these experiences. Maybe you're a local shop that makes soap or something.
Yeah.
So why not reach out to local Airbnbs and find out, can they stock your products? And, you're thriving on that local brand. And, that's something people are on holiday. They want to take back something local with them. So again, it's really just thinking, how can I think about getting my products in front of a different or adjacent customer type that maybe I've not tapped into?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. It's thinking it slightly different and thinking it going back to a customer need or an unmet need. And even if the customer doesn't really know what requirement they have, but they have an underlying desire to get, going back to what we talked about on the previous podcast about what they want is just the outcome they're looking for. And I think it's a Henry Ford quote where he said, if I ask customers what they want, they wanted faster horses that don't get tired.
Yes.
And really that desire from a customer point of view, they just want to get from A to B quicker without a horse that has to take a break. And the solution was the motor car, and it was like, customers would never say, actually, we need a motor car, but they did have the need that they could kind of identify. So,
yeah, and I think, it's an opportunity for people to think about, maybe you're a brick and mortar retail shop and you've never done a pop-up event. There's festivals and, all sorts of events that happen over the summer. Maybe your company could just try it, do a pop-up and see what happens. Or, as you said, maybe combining a well-known high street brand with a luxury brand or something. Yeah. So it's just maybe finding, partnerships are just one way to be innovative. I think we were just talking about Uber, I think, has done a fantastic job of this, and several other companies have as well, where they had an existing infrastructure and they were looking for ways to add additional value. And so what they did is they started Uber Eats.
Yes.
Which is amazing. We've got drivers, we've got people that need things. And, hey, if I can sit in my bed and have someone deliver me a McDonald's meal, great. Then I don't have to leave my couch and somebody can bring me food. So companies can also do innovation in that way. What's my infrastructure? What do I already have? I already have a customer call center. So what else could I do? Another really great example is my local Tesco has an every parcel. Yep. So again, I can now get my parcels delivered to the Tesco because, maybe I travel, I'm not home. So Tesco's already there. They might have seen a drop in their footfall. So now if I pop in to get a parcel, I'm probably going to get some milk and some dinner and all of that as well. So again, it's taking those existing infrastructures and looking for how can I use this to partner with someone else or come up with my own service to get more footfall. It's a really
interesting point. I think this is where small companies are good at this sort of thing, but bigger companies or they're more legacy systems, they become afraid, or they become rigid, or they just, no, this is what we do, we don't do anything else. Yeah. It's funny because where I live there's a local coffee shop they're basically still a coffee shop, but they had a big space and they've just changed part of the space to sell boutique clothing, you know. So it's still a coffee shop, but it's now a boutique clothing. So they've worked out, well, actually we can increase revenue and get more customers through the door by just having something like that. It's like having, it's when Waterstone's the bookseller started to partnership with, I think was it Starbucks or coffee shops, to realise that actually if people are looking at books, let's have a coffee shop in there. Everyone's kind of cottoned onto that now, but that was another way of thinking creatively. I think obviously not everyone works in a company which is B2C or as exciting as a Greg's or a brand that can do this sort of thing. But I think even in B2B or dare I say less sexy industries, whether it be like things like insurance or financial services, very functional based, I think there's still an opportunity to do those sort of creative approaches. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of B2B is so overlapped. And I think that's kind of a challenge within B2B, right? Because they solve a very specific problem, don't they? So, maybe if you're an insurance company, you could partner with financial services to, to bring in some different types of clients or different types of revenue. Again, working in financial services, I've seen that a lot of times people think that, it's just a certain type of clientele, but now they've got the families and the children of their clientele that now, they want different services. So how can we work with them to bring services? So absolutely. It's just about, like we said at the beginning, taking that time to really think about what are people actually trying to do? What has changed in the marketplace? What disruptors maybe can I think of, to bring something different? Because people want to get things done, but they also want something a little unexpected. Again, I was watching something where a person had like campgrounds, but they made it really nice, and they had the ice cream truck. We were just talking about an ice cream truck.
Yes.
Little touches like that, made such a difference, and they were able to turn around this kind of failing business by just doing very, very small things, which is back to what we said previously about you can find, some real gold in these small outcomes as well.
Yeah. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but this is quick and really worth it. Are you tired of manual processes and never getting to what really matters, which is actually taking action from customer feedback? Well, I think you'll find this really useful. CustomerSure's new AI-powered text analytics feature, where comments are automatically tagged, sentiment applied, and you get clear actions of where to prioritize your efforts. Now, click the link in the comments to get more information and really check it out. Now, let's get back to the video. I think that's a really good point. It's made me think of another thing that I really like is when businesses empower their staff, particularly frontline staff, to control the customer experience. So thinking more about the customer experience world for a second, where I've seen some really good examples on LinkedIn where people are getting handwritten notes from people that they've dealt with, or things in the post, and people are so surprised and blown away by those touches. Then they share it, and they become not just they become fans and advocates of that brand, and then they're actively talking about it. So, and I think that's because those cultures have fostered an environment where, okay, we don't just have rules and protocols for how you deal with customers. And I've seen some organisations where they have a budget and say, look, if you want to spend your budget on delighting a customer by writing a handwritten note to a customer or a child based on something that's happened, then go for it. Nothing's off the table, So.
Well, and I think that's another really good example where, companies are running towards things like chatbots because they make things easier for them, right? And it's cheaper than contact centers and things like that. But again, I've done plenty of research with customers, and they can spot a chatbot and an AI, a mile off, and having that kind of hand personal touch, or even non-digital. Again, we're so digital now, and having those small kind of non-digital experiences are such a a breath of fresh air, definitely. So it creates that, again, it's that moment of wow. We talked earlier about NPS, and people don't think about businesses that way, but you'll remember that if you get that handwritten note or something small, just that, the mint on the pillow they used to leave in hotels.
Yes.
It's just a small thing, but you remember it, and it's something that you might be more likely to tell others about.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I do wonder if those human experiences where it's genuinely human and there's understanding and empathy and emotion involvement, whether those will have more resonance and impact, because we're moving increasingly towards an AI digital age where, and I think that acceleration is going to just continue. The genie's out the bottle now, and it's a force for good and a force for evil. Let's be frank. It'll automate a lot of things that need to happen. But I think this still needs that human interaction. An example I had, actually, we ordered some raw pet food for our dog tried this new company, and there was a handwritten note from the person who packed it or whatever, but it was written to Daisy, our dog. It wasn't written to us, and it was written, "Oh, hi Daisy, hope whatever it said about having a good day chasing the ball. We hope you really love our new food." And it was lovely, and me and my wife thought it was amazing that it was that personal touch, and it took someone a minute to add a handwritten note to the dog. And obviously it's for our benefit, not the dog. But it's that sort of thing that I kind of, my advice to all companies would be with, going back to what we're talking about, the innovation, the creative problem solving, what could improve customers' experience. Let's do something simple as that, That didn't cost anything other than someone's time to write a note,
Yeah, exactly. And, that's an example of, making a change to the delivery process. But, there's things where, you can make changes to even your pricing. So, for example, I think a couple of years ago, Cafe Nero or one of those, the world's changed, right? People work from home. They work from a coffee shop now. And so they introduced a subscription model. And you pay such and such $9.99 a month, and you get a card or whatever it is. But then you get free coffee while you're there. There's free Wi-Fi. There all those things. So it's making changes to their pricing, but it's also being reflective of the changes that are happening in the world and understanding that not everybody's in an office and sat at a desk. And so I think really one thing as we've said that companies need to be better at is really just looking across the entire customer journey. Where can we experiment? Where can we try and inject some creativity? It's everything from the onboarding to the pricing to the product itself to the delivery to the follow-up, the offboarding, all of that. There's all opportunities there to be more creative, and just small changes can really, make that big difference. I love that. I'm going to have to find out this company and order some dog food.
I bought a nut box, I think it was. So give them a shout out, I think it was. But I'm just to pick your brains based on your experience. So say if there's a company watching this podcast and they're saying, yes, we want to do more innovation, more creative problem solving, more engagement with our staff to come up with ideas that we may choose to pilot and do some A/B testing and things like that. How, in your experience, have you kind of helped foster that environment or kind of create that environment with companies that perhaps it's a bit more alien to them? Is there any kind of best practice approaches or thoughts on that?
I think we've kind of touched on this in the previous episode, but maybe having a day where it's innovation day, or you save a Friday afternoon for this is the hackathon time, or this is your own private time, or hosting a workshop. There's so many different kind of tools and frameworks out there for creative thinking. Another really great method is what if I took something away? So I've got this coffee mug. What if it didn't have a handle? What would that look like? And so let's think about, my product, the dog food. What are the main components of my dog food? It's a bag, it's, kibble inside. What if we took the bag away? What would that look like? How would we get our product to someone else? So, there's all these methods that are freely available to just kind of sit, and you think, we can't have a dog food with no bag. That's ridiculous. Yeah. And then a half an hour later, you've got something that's completely amazing that your team never would have thought of if you hadn't started in that place of, this is impossible and we can't do that. What would happen if we added something to your dog food instead of taking something away from it? And what possibilities does that bring up? Yeah. So I think, again, I like to think creativity is a muscle like any other muscle in your body. And so the more you use it, the more that you get comfortable, and, you can come up with these ideas. And a lot of them will be wacky, and that's fine. We said that, 10% of these ideas may actually make it to market, but that's okay. It's that whole process of thinking differently. So
it is.
Definitely set aside time and don't say it's only R&D that gets to do this. Like we said, bring in finance, bring in HR, bring in all aspects of your company and open up that thinking and innovation process to everyone, and you'll be surprised, because when we have our different SME hats on, we think differently. I view things through the lens of a methodologist and a strategist, right? And you view things slightly differently. So you and I sat here would have different ideas about how to make this coffee mug better. So, making sure that innovation is not a gatekeeping activity and that everyone's allowed to participate.
No, I think it's a really good point, actually, because I've heard it many times where in some organizations where people take their brain out and leave it at the door when they go into the office, and then they put it back on, and they become the person at work, and they become the person at home or their home or social life, and they're two different people, which is quite unfortunate, because everyone has ideas. And I think you touched on a really good point, Alicia, about it should never be limited to R&D departments, or people that have a specific role to create new ideas. Everyone's got them, and also people feel empowered or feel listened to when they're given that opportunity to do so. The final point I'd make on that as well is involve customers as well is often a good point. Yeah. So I've been involved in lots of workshops and focus groups over the years with customers and potential customers of organisations, and you can kind of create things there, and you talk about the journey they go through, and even if it's a relatively dry or call it mundane customer journey of like, look, I'm going to renew my car insurance. How do I do that? Digital, telephone, broker. What are the different ways I do that? What are the interactions? Customers will be really good at telling you what the pain points are, what's good, what hacks them off, what could be better. And that can be the starting point that can germinate into an idea, So
yeah, and I think the podcast is called Close the Loop, is that
yes,
right?
Yes.
So that's an important part of this, right? Because then customers feel valued, they feel listened to, you've taken this on board.
Yeah.
We can't promise anything. We don't know that we're going to build a rocket ship for you to get from A to B, right? But, I think that goes a long way with the customer to know that they are being listened to. And, sometimes you send off a comment and it goes into the void and they never know, did they get it? Are they listening to me? I don't feel valued as a customer. So yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect way to show that you're open and you're trying new things, but you're also listening to the customer, which is the heart of the business.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Yeah, very good. Just final point on that. So if you have that innovation, that creative solving process, that foster that incubation, if you like, of ideas, in your experience, how kind of do you manage that process through? Is it kind of developing it further, prototyping? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say really from there, you can then slot it into your other ways of working. So, if you have roadmaps and development cycles, then you can just, put some of these ideas on your backlog and start, kind of filtering them through your regular development process. Again, some companies set up innovation teams or innovation, groups where that's all they do. Personally, I think that's kind of challenging because then people are like, well, what are those cool people over there get to have all the fun? So I think it's best if you can kind of keep it, like we said, to involving a lot of people and not just that special team or that special department. But definitely you're starting with the ideas, but you should still test it and use the, kind of methods that you normally do to test ideas before you bring them out to market. So you're already halfway there, right? You just need to make space for that creativity.
Yeah. No, I agree. Definitely. Great. Well, thank you very much, Alicia. Thank you for watching and listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this next episode of the podcast with Alicia here. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. We've talked a lot about innovation, creative problem-solving process, how to foster an environment where organisations are kind of more open to trialing new things. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions on any of that. So do get in touch, and any questions you have, when Alicia and myself will be very happy to come back to you on any of that. So
yeah, thanks again.
Thanks for watching.